Hello, you're listening to a Heroes Welcome episode 10. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Wes, and with me, as always, to talk everything Overwatch, Andrew. Hi, Andrew.
I'm doing all right. Got a chance to get in, play some of the PTR, and excited to talk about that.
Yeah, I wish I could play more, man. I can never find enough time for more Overwatch, but, you do what you can.
Yeah, get in what we can when we can.
So I talked a lot about McCree last week, specifically his right click and how useless it was, and I thought of a circumstance where it's actually usable, right? So imagine it. If there's a shield, like a Reinhardt shield or maybe Winston shield with absolutely nothing else to shoot at, right click can do more damage per second and take down that shield faster.
Right. So when you can't headshot something, then you actually have a time to be able to use the right click.
In a rare circumstance that there's nothing else to shoot at ever,
which probably won't come up too often.
I found a use for it, but definitely expecting some changes, and we've heard little rumors of it,
Right,
it's
Blizzard talked a little bit about it, so I'm sure they're keeping a close eye on it.
So you've been playing a lot of PTR. How's that look?
Yeah, so I got in PTR. I did my 10 placement matches. I even played several games after the fact. Very, very exciting. Take a look at, see where they're going with it. A lot of new changes with it, and it's going great so far that I've seen. I know they're already talking about potential changes here and there, but it's looking really good so far.
So about how many matches have you played? Because you had the 10 placement matches.
Somewhere in the neighborhood of like 15 or 20 at least, so
okay, got
a good amount of games played in.
All right, well, I just did the one. I checked it out. I think the UI is nice. Obviously, I'm following pretty closely. I know all the ins and outs of it.
Right. I mean, the UI, dramatic changes in the UI. I know we've seen in the beta some UI elements that they kind of added for competitive, and so they kind of really built off of that. Just awesome UI. It looks really good. Yeah,
even outside competitive, just like where your portraits are, your count levels, all looks nice and clean.
So your character screen, your character select, and the tab menu that you can pull up in-game, they've already, since the PTR went live, they actually changed a few things as well already.
All right, so let's go straight into the news. We're already talking about the PTR. So that was released Tuesday, 6/21. We talked about there being placement matches. So the whole competitive thing is the main thing to showcasing, right?
Right. So it's all about competitive play right now. They've added that feature in there. So you start off, you get in. Once you're level 25, you're able to go in and do your 10 placement matches. And then from there, you're given a skill rating based off of your placement matches.
Right, so we've talked about it in the past, but they have the placement matches. There's 10 of them, and after that, they're going to give you a skill rating, which ranges from 1 to 100.
Right.
We're seeing most of them fall within the 40 to 50-ish range.
Right, so specifically me, I went in, I did my 10 placement matches. I won 6 out of the 4 of my placement matches, and I believe I ended up at around 47 is where I ended up. So it's about what I'm seeing. I've seen people posting on the forums and other place who went dramatically the other way. Specifically, one person I saw who only won 4 of the 6 matches and ended up in the high 50s and 60s. So
yeah, which makes you think what other things they're considering. Maybe you're hitting MMR in there.
Yeah, we got to imagine that the MMR is heavily taken into account. I know even in the 10 placement matches I saw a good amount of fluctuation between the teams that I was facing. From just, stomps in one direction to just teams that were totally just mowing through me and my team. So
we've seen some new systems altogether. There's a time bank system, so there's a visual representation of how much time is allocated for certain things. It's very clear. There's a coin flip kind of sudden death thing in the game.
Right, so a bunch of new features added to the whole competitive play. So specifically to talk about the time bank system, I had a lot of fun with it. There's definitely a lot of good that comes with the time bank system, and specifically I believe Kaplan mentioned that they got a lot of positive feedback from the time bank system. But to kind of break down how that works, you kind of want to talk a little bit about it?
Well, as far as I understand, especially on like assault maps, it records how much time you had left over, and if the other team is also successful, then you kind of start over again with the time you had left over.
Right, so you start off with your baseline time. I believe it's on, like most situations, it's 10 minutes to complete the whole map, and whatever is left over of that is then recorded, and then if both teams are successful, then the match is redone with only that remaining time left until you get to the point where one team cannot complete the map.
And they talked about maybe changing the amount of time allocated to take the points. They talked about a few changes.
Right, so that's one of the things that was changed already since the PTR had launched. Originally, the initial time set for the first point or to cap on like hybrid maps to cap the payload was 5 minutes, and they actually reduced that from 5 minutes to 4 minutes already. And then also sudden death went from a full 2 minutes of sudden death down to a minute 45.
Yeah, so I'm definitely, anticipating what it actually comes live as. I'm going to have an open mind. I'm going to play it, try to have as much fun as possible. And I mean, everything I'm hearing sounds, for the most part, pretty solid.
Right. So the other thing to mention, coin flip on the sudden death. So basically the way it works is if both teams are successful close enough to the point where we're going to go to a sudden death, previously where it was a random capture point King of the Hill map, it actually goes to a random coin flip. So it actually does a sudden death on the map type that you're on. So whether it's a hybrid, capture point payload or a actual assault map, you actually get a coin flip, and then that decides who is attacking or defending, and it only goes to the first point. So it's either capping the first point or just being able to cap the
first
payload.
Checkpoint, right?
The first checkpoint, exactly. So you have, originally it was 2 minutes, it's down to 1 minute 45, and that's hopefully to reduce the time that you're actually spending in sudden death to get more games in, and then also helping reduce the chance of, that happening multiple times.
Yeah, I definitely see some changes coming to that system, and they've already talked about in the fall addressing those changes. So we'll see how it pans out, but I think there'll be a lot less sudden deaths. I think it'll be much more consistent. The better team should win more often, not just random King of the Hill, and that'll snowball from there kind of thing. So
right,
the better team should be winning more often.
That's what I've seen. Like I mentioned before, it's pretty easy to tell so far where I've been able to play which team is the better team, and it's really working out the way it should so far.
All right, so let's talk about lever penalties. We are somewhat familiar with them because they do exist in the quick match system, but there's a little bit of additional penalties in the competitive. I know you could be suspended, just from competitive if you're having a problem leaving, up to and including an actual season ban.
Right, so they definitely went much more harsh on the lever penalty in the competitive play. Right now, quickly, basically, they just calculate your last 20 games. I think we talked about it previously, and then you get a 75% reduction in XP earned while you're playing your quick play. They do still have that existing in the competitive play as well, but as you mentioned, you can get a period of suspension from competitive play itself all the way up to actually receiving a whole ban for that season.
Yeah, so much more harsh. I believe, they've been listening to feedback from the community. And so all the same exact penalties, the experience penalties and everything, but there's a few other changes. You could be banned. You could just be, pretty much timed out, and you're not able to play other competitive matches while the game you left is still in session as well.
Exactly, and as well, when we're talking about lever penalties, there's a lot of changes added to the competitive play on how leaving actually works. We mentioned previously in another episode that basically lever penalty occurs whenever you leave a match from after the actual assemble your team, so once you're actually in the game, all the way up until the victory or defeat screen. So that would be when you're beginning lever penalty. But in cases where other people on either, say, the other team or on your team leave in a match, there are cases where you're actually able to leave without penalty. I know currently they said they're still having issues with that. Some people are having issues where they're actually receiving penalty for that, but I'm sure that will get fixed real quickly.
Yeah, so the gist of it is if someone leaves, there's a little prompt that says, someone left, you have the option to leave without being penalized, without, getting a ding to your skill rating. But some people might argue you could exploit that, possibly, so we'll see. We'll see what comes.
Yeah, we'll see if that sticks to it, but so far I'm pretty happy with the way that has been treated. All
right, so we touched on it a little bit, but there's also a new interface, specifically within the competitive play. There's you're able to see the team lineups, you're able to visibly see, groups, whether they be on your team or your opponent's team. You're able to see not only your own skill rating, but you're able to see the skill ratings of everyone on your team and against you, the summation average of them.
Right. So all that is included. You have the team lineup is kind of displayed like other sports information before you actually get into the game. You see the lineup of both teams, their skill ratings, and the average. And then you're actually able to get in the game. You can see who's grouped up very visually, and you can see that. And you can see the skill ratings of all your players and the enemy team at any point in the game just by pressing the tab button, just like you normally would in any other match.
And overall, it's pretty good. It's just more information. You can't go wrong with more information.
No, I mean, it looks really good. It's done really simple and very well. It matches all the other UI elements. It really looks really good right now.
I'm just hoping that it's not a common occurrence to see, especially in a solo queue, to see multiple teams, whether it be on your team, like multiple groups, right?
Exactly. Like I said, I played probably at least 15, 20 matches, both the 10 placement matches and other matches outside of placement. And I think it only happened like once, I believe, that I ended up in a group match.
And things on PTR are obviously a lot different than a live game, smaller sample
can't
pool.
really judge one from the other because it's such a small pool, and then even more so once you get into skill rating, even smaller pool of people that you're playing with. So
yeah, it's just a dynamic, queue feature where you're able to queue as any group size, kind of, could potentially be scary, I just hope that, the vast majority of solo queuers are only with solo queuers.
Exactly.
And vice versa.
We talked about it previously with our discussion on the forum boards and that such about how we felt about the dynamic queue versus the solo and team queue options. So hopefully, we hope everything works out. We obviously want this game to be as best it can be, and we look forward to seeing how it all folds.
So in addition to all those changes, we've seen the avoid player option removed from the game in the PTR. Currently, they've already told us that they've disabled the system entirely, even in the live game, but in the next major patch, that option will just be removed from the game. And people were exploiting that as well. So if there was someone who was really good and you didn't want to go up against him, you just avoid him. And from the sounds of it, it's really making a mess of the matchmaking system.
And exactly, we've seen on both Kaplan's posts on the forums and from other people. I had a lot of people still asking about it. I guess they were confused with the fact that the button or the option is still available in the live, but it does not do anything. They've actually disabled it completely. And the reason, like you mentioned, was the matchmaking. So we had several high-tier players who were going up against other teams, and the teams were running into them constantly, and they didn't like playing against certain people, so they were completely just avoiding the person altogether, and it was really messing up their queues. Their queues were super long, and then when they did get into queues, the reverse result of that was actually he was getting into lower tier players, and so he was just running into really, really low rated players as well. So
yeah, I've voiced my concern with the quality matches in general and kind of prioritizing queue times. So it seems like if Blizzard thinks, oh, you've been waiting too long for a game, we're gonna throw quality matches out the window and just throw them into a game, which for quick play honestly works out fine, but hopefully we don't see that really in competitive. I'm willing to wait as long as it takes to get a nice quality match. That's where I come to competitive play for that experience. And also keep in mind the report features and things are still there, so you can report people for cheating, you can report them for spamming, and so on. But,
yeah, so all those features are still there, and they're really tied up really nicely in the character assemble screen as well as in the character tab view as well. So you're really able to get in there. It's all labeled out real nice, and it fits with the UI very well. So the prefer player button is still in there. They just removed the avoid player because of the problems they were having. So it's one of those things where they really wanted to add it in there. A lot of people feel like it was a good thing. They were running into people that they didn't want to play with, but it just had such a catastrophic effect on the matchmaking that it just was doing more harm than good at that point.
And the last little bit of information regarding the PTR is we hear that Season 1 is going to be ending August 18th. So pretty much the first season is going to be summer, and we talked about this before, but it's going to be a 3-month-long season. There'll be some time in between the seasons where it ends and where it begins, but pretty much all the seasons of the year, fall, winter, summer, spring, we'll have a new season. So August 13th is when Season 1 is expected to end, but that's tentative.
Yeah, August 18th. So that's what we're looking at right now. Hopefully the competitive play will be live really quickly here. They did say the end of this month, so we are patiently waiting that.
So let's talk about changes and feedback that the game's been receiving. Specifically within the competitive, we talked quite a bit about it, but the sudden death we hear used to occur 35% of the time, and that was in the beta testing before the game came out, and we discussed about how even with those complete lopsided games in the PTR because, MMR and all that was broken, even within that, setting, 35% sudden deaths occurred, and, we've seen a much reduction. I think, more successful changes, right?
Right, exactly. So with the new system, we're seeing much lower numbers, at least so far with the PTR. So the new system, assault maps are only seeing sudden death occurring about 9% of the time, which is the lowest. And that's where they really want to be. They really want to be under that 10%. Escort and hybrid maps are still seeing a little bit more, from 16 to 18% in escort maps to about 20 to 29% in hybrids. So across the board, much lower. As we mentioned, that 35% really skewed because of the beta. The beta matchmaking was all over the place. So if you were to look at that probably in the live setup, you probably would see that number much higher. So the fact that they're able to get the numbers down where they are is just a testament to how well things have been working out so far.
And I think most people would agree that sudden death is a good thing in and of itself, having that way to break the tie. But the occurrence of it, it doesn't feel special, doesn't feel like a special occasion if it's happening half of every game you play. So,
exactly. Actually, Kaplan spoke in length about just matches in general and what people expect. It's not something that we actually put in the show notes, but he actually spoke about people's expectations and what they expect in a match. And a lot of people, what he's finding, are expecting the matches to be, if we want to win. Every person has that natural expectation. They want to come in, they want to feel like they're a good player, they want to win most of the time. So, being in a sudden death experience, a lot of people, winning really close or losing really close, it actually can turn out to be a very negative effect in that sense as well. So seeing sudden death happen, a lot of times, 35% of the time or more, and having those close matches can actually be a very negative effect. So we definitely want to make sure that we minimize that as much as possible.
All right, and moving on, we heard from Jeff Kaplan on the forums, as he frequents, which we love, obviously, because it gives us a lot to talk about here. But he broke down kind of the positive feedback that they're receiving in general and the negative feedback that they're receiving. And he's specifically talking pretty much about the PTR and the stuff
competitive play, yeah.
So one of the positive things were the skill rating and how it works and how it's being displayed and how it's, not a hidden skill rating.
Right. So one of the things that I think is just such a great addition to the UI is just the fact that, and they already had changed that previously from when PTR was first launched till now. So previously you could see your skill rating in the team lineup before the match started, but after that point you were not able to see the skill rating once you got into the match, which I didn't expect. I expected it to be there from the start, but really quickly they added that in there. It's such a great addition, just to be able to look at the screen and be like, oh, this one player is completely wrecking our team, and then you look at his skill rating and just see, oh, maybe he's one skill rating higher or whatever. So it's just great to have that in there for information.
Right, and we've covered a little bit, but skill rating is going to range from 1 to 100. It pretty much is in place of like a gold, silver, bronze, platinum kind of, people might be more familiar with that, but it's pretty much a version of that, but with 100 different increments.
Right. So instead of having just set up groups that people fall into, it's actually more spread out with 100 different, from 1 to 100.
Right. So the way it works, from what we understand, is the average player would be 50 in the middle. It's pretty much like a bell curve, right? So the vast majority are going to be between the 40 and 60 range, and as you go up, you're going to have the better players, and as you go down,
right,
the people who don't win as much.
That's how we're expecting it to work out. As I mentioned, I ended up, I believe, 47, right around there. So it's a testament to how the matchmaker is working so far. So definitely looking forward to seeing what's going to happen once they actually release it to the entire game into live. So
right. So Kaplan just noted that is a positive feedback they're receiving from the community, that they really like the skill rating system, and I would agree. Would you agree?
Definitely. Like I said, skill rating is one of the best additions to the game so far. Love having that in there just to be able to see where everybody is.
So another thing that he was getting positive feedback on his team was the strong lever penalty. It's obviously much more strong than the quick match.
Definitely. From the minute I got into the game, even in the 10 placement matches that I did, I had levers. And just the whole changes that they've made to the competitive lever penalty, from the ability to leave the game after multiple people have already left, to even being able to, if a person leaves prior to the game actually launching, it will actually just close the match down and restart another queue for you to get into another match. I really like those additions because we would much rather wait a longer period of time and get into a better match than just get into a match for somebody to leave. So I much prefer that. Definitely like the strong lever penalty all the way up to the season bans for repeat offenders. So definitely a strong addition.
Yeah, it might be one of those things where when it goes live, a lot of people aren't going to realize how it works, so there might be quite a bit of levers at the very beginning. Do you think that'll happen? Maybe the first week, you'll see them more often, but...
Yeah, I definitely expect that we're going to see definitely an influx of levers in the beginning. So hopefully as they figure the lever penalty out and how it works, that we'll see it a lot less. So
yeah, but I mean, you make up 1/6 of your team, so the odds of there being a lever is on your side, right? Because...
Exactly, and I mean, again, a testament to the way it's worked so far in PTR. I saw quite a few levers in the very beginning, and as time went on, we've seen less and less. So
yeah, and on PTR, you're going to inherently have a lot of levers because it doesn't matter.
Exactly. Yeah. So
all right, so let's talk about the assault map changes, and that was also part of the positive feedback that Kaplan was receiving from the community. Everything probably from the reduction of the time to the what we were talking about before, right?
The time bank system specifically. Yeah. Previously, when he mentioned these positive, I don't believe that they had actually already made the changes yet for the 5 to 4 minutes. I think that came right after, but mainly the time bank system is what they were talking about specifically with the map changes. So I really had a lot to talk about with this because I had, like I said, plenty of games to play. I played a lot of assault maps, and I seen kind of the good and the bad with this system. I really like the system as a whole, the way it works. I like having the time bank. I like the way it kind of plays out, and it gives a lot more. It ends the games a lot better. You don't see too many sudden deaths in the assault, like we talked about 9%. But actually, I did get into a certain couple of matches where it actually ended up being a very bad experience, and I haven't heard anybody else talk about it. I know we mentioned that that Kaplan specifically talked about positive feedback for this, but one of my experiences was actually very poor. I got into a match where it was completely one-sided, and I mean, because of the timing system, although we were getting completely destroyed on my team, we were able to still complete the maps, and therefore we had to actually do multiple different replays of the match before it ended. So really long match versus a team that was obviously just much better than us.
Yeah, because the problem with the assault maps is before they were the most skewed as far as having an advantage whether you're attacker or defender. And with the new system, I think the better team's going to win more often. It may take more time to get there, but it's less snowbally as well because you have more time to change to different maybe hero, like different cheese. If you have to counter the team, you actually have time to react as opposed to some other overtime options.
Yeah, I mean, I still find that you see a lot of times the attacker still winning. As I mentioned, that was kind of the issue with it, is that the defenders just weren't able to hold someone off for the full length of it. So even though they were a much better team than us, if we got together a decent coordinated attack, we were able to get through. And so we were still completing the map. I believe it was on the...
Volskaya?
It wasn't Volskaya. It was Egypt...
Nubani?
Not
Temple of Anubis.
Temple of Anubis. So it was on Temple of Anubis, and we were able to complete the map every single time, even the very last time in sudden death completing it, but because there was 0 time left in the bank, we actually lost. But it was just a back and forth match. I mean, they completely destroyed us every single time. But
you said they completely destroyed you, but you're able to capture points multiple times.
Yeah, but it was really, like I said, as a matter of just us getting together one coordinated push and being able to complete it. But I mean, you look at our times and time banks, and the first time around, they did it so quickly. There was like less than a minute and a half to complete both points. I mean, they completely just wrecked us.
So you want to see a system where if they complete the map 3 or 4 minutes faster than you, then they just win?
It definitely needs to happen because it was brutal to play like 4 or 5 attempts on that map, and then just to turn around and lose it like we should have the first time around.
All right, well, we do know that they take in consideration your individual performance and your characters and stuff. So even though you might see the impending doom, you could still try your best and not lose as much skill rating potentially?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely takes into account all of that from your actual performance to the team performance and to where your position is in the skill rating so far. So definitely, I obviously try my best. I still had fun with it. Like I said, it was interesting just to get in there and kind of figure things out. And I really like the system. They need some kind of repercussion against long-winded matches like that.
Right, and the last thing Kappa mentioned was a positive feedback they received is the visible groups. So we talked about it a little bit, but the fact that when you go into a competitive match, you see who's grouped with who, and that's both on your team and the enemy team. So you pretty much know what to expect.
Yeah, like I said, I think I only got into one match, and I believe it was in placement where I had a group on my team, I believe it was, of 2 people. So it wasn't that big of a deal, but definitely so far has been working really well, and obviously love being able to see groups in the actual screen.
Right, so there's a couple things you mentioned that they received negative feedback for, and that's going to be the coin flip and the sudden death. We talked about it already a little bit, but I think overall the majority was pretty positive.
Definitely, like I said, definitely, especially for me, positive overall. I seen the coin flip right away, and when that came up, and I was just, it didn't even bug me that much having the coin flip, but I knew that was probably going to get changed right away, just because most people don't like things like that being able to decide the game in any kind of way. So
they've talked about removing it in the fall.
Right, so
that's their target.
Yeah, it's going to be much later on that they're going to remove it. They're going to do the best they can to kind of mitigate its effect on things in the short term, as we mentioned, from changing the initial assault on the first point from 5 minutes to 4 minutes, and then also from the sudden death timer as well, to kind of reduce their effects on the outcome of the match, and then also to kind of reduce the amount that people are getting into those positions.
Right, so with the competitive play changes, we learned that there's some changes they're going to be able to make right away. We talked a little bit about it and some long-term future changes. So the initial match time, we've touched a little bit upon it, the assault and escort and hybrid maps. Before you would have 5 minutes as attackers, now you're going to have 4 minutes.
Right, and that's a direct result of trying to make sure that sudden death is happening a lot less often. I think they found that, I found a lot of times being in the lower skilled teams having a lot of trouble attacking, especially the initial point, which should be pretty easy to do. But just when moving that from 5 minutes to 4 minutes really kind of rounds things out and makes it a lot harder for teams that are finding a hard time attacking. So I know several times I was in a group that was having trouble attacking, and it came down to the last minute or so, and we finally were able to coordinate a push and get that push and actually cap the first point. So just by reducing it from 5 minutes to 4 minutes, it's going to drastically change the amount of time to complete the map and end up in a sudden death.
Right, and another thing to expect with the new patch, which should be within a week of this recording, hopefully, is the sudden death timer will be reduced from 2 minutes to 1:45.
Right, so they've already done that in the PTR. We're expected it to go live with that sudden death timer from 2 minutes to 1:45. And again, same thing. It's just going to reduce the amount of time and really kind of shave off those teams that are just barely brushing it by. And so it's going to reduce the amount of time for things to end in sudden death and just make things end a lot more clearly.
Right, so in the long-term future, this is probably going to be the fall season, which will be after summer, is they're looking to make a time-based system for the escort and hybrid maps.
Right, so they're going to be changing the timing system across the board to all match types, the escort and hybrid maps. They were really getting a lot of positive feedback on that, as I mentioned, and a lot of people like that system. And because of the way it's set up, it's really hard to end up in a sudden death situation with those, just because it really narrows things down and gives multiple attempts, and it's just going to clearly find a victory or a defeat most of the time. So they really like that, and they're really kind of pushing that on all map types.
So do you like currently how everything's going? Do you think their ability to add to the game, I mean the speed in which you're doing it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think that they've been doing a great job so far with adding features to the game and just really taking a look at where things are and receiving feedback. And they're just doing an amazing job of making changes so far. Right.
So you're in the camp that they should go ahead and release a competitive right away rather than wait.
Definitely. I've been waiting for a long time. I cannot wait for it to finally release, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. And I think things are going well enough that they can make changes as they go. But I think that I think we've been waiting long enough for our competitive play.
Yeah, it feels like a long time, but the game is pretty new still.
Right.
But
it feels like forever.
we're spoiled though. We want everything now.
Exactly.
Right. So they talked about having like possible ties in competitive.
Right. So the difference with this time-based system from the previous systems is that it actually reduces, as I mentioned before, one of the reasons why they're pushing it is it reduces the possible chance of ties. So it's really going to find a clear winner and really more often the time. I mean, the only options you really have is if neither team pushes the payload at all whatsoever, then it will end up in a tie, or if neither team captures the payload at all before they even get to the payload. So that's only on hybrid maps. So that's only on hybrid maps. If none of the teams captures the payload at all, then it will go to sudden death. Or if both teams push it all the way, and that's in overtime, then it will end up in a tie. So like I mentioned, there's only a few possible ties. It's not going to happen a lot. And as we said, just changing it in the assault map, we've seen it go from about 35% down to 9%. It's a huge reduction. So they really like that and are trying to push that across the board.
And to be clear, this is like future things they're trying to add to the game.
Right. So this is going to be in the long term. It's not quite fall. We're not sure exactly when it will happen, but it's in the, as they mentioned, long-term future for the game.
Right. So we talked about removing the coin flip and sudden death. They're talking about having stats play a more significant role.
Right. So basically, the current sudden death that they've found so far, they're actually looking at the statistics because some people are still seeing, at least anecdotally, an unbalance between the attack and defense. And Kaplan really kind of stated that he's looking at the actual facts from the actual game, and they're a lot more balanced than we think they are. As I mentioned before, it's kind of a thing across the board. Anecdotally, you find ways to look at things, through a certain light, and you think that one way is more balanced than the other. Grass is always greener on the other side, but they're definitely more balanced than we think they are, and especially with this new system, things are even more balanced than they were previously.
Yeah, because I think the problem most people are having is with the coin flip is you're either attacking or defending, and they think they're either going to be disadvantage or advantage, and it's not they're not equal, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not equal across the board. I know, like I said, the first time I saw the coin flip, I was like, oh, this is interesting, and then right away I ended up on defense on that very first coin flip, and I was like, oh, no. I pretty much expected it. It's kind of my luck when it comes to things. But, I mean, we were still able to defend several times when it went into the coin flip. So, I mean, it's definitely not equal, but people just don't like that asymmetrical resolution period.
Right, and they did give us a realistic time frame for all of the changes that they've been talking about, and that's fall, late September to maybe late December.
Right, so, it's a long period of time, so it's a long ways off that we're going to see these changes, which is why they mentioned kind of changing things in the short term with the timers and such to try and reduce the effect that they have on the game. They feel that there's a lot more pressing things to fix, and so they're kind of going to hold off on some of these changes.
All right, so let's move on to talk about Kaplan and him addressing the matchmaking. So within the last week, he's come out and explained even more in detail the matchmaking. Not every little detail, but I know I learned a lot of things about matchmaking, all the things that they take in consideration. And pretty much he defined matchmaking. What's the purpose of matchmaking? The purpose is to find other players to play with because it's a 6v6 game, and not always. I mean, the majority of people probably don't have six, people all together ready to play every time. So the purpose of matchmaking is to find other players and have the best game experience within that setting.
Yeah, and I think we really take that for granted, the fact that matchmaking is so readily available in games today that we don't consider what all goes into matchmaking. I know you mentioned a lot of things that were taken into account that we don't normally associate with matchmaking, so I don't know if you want to kind of break that down, talk to us about what all is included.
Right, so the more obvious things, obviously, they have a hidden MMR, which is probably the most significant, that weighs the most when it comes to putting teams together and individuals together. We also learned that the time waited we we talked a little bit about that already, but the amount of time you wait does alter the types of matches. The longer you wait, the more elasticity it'll have, and maybe not having such good quality matches if you're waiting a real long time. And this is in general. We learned that ping plays a role, which we kind of already knew about, because one of the major feedbacks they got in the beta was they didn't have this feature, right? And so people, in Australia were coming to America. I know I played tons of games on the East Coast, and it's very obvious because, I don't have single-digit ping anymore. Now it's 70. So we know that ping does play a significant role in matchmaking. Grouping plays a role. So if there's different size groups, if you're in a 5-man or 6-man, that's also going to be heavily considered as well. So, some things we knew, some things we didn't really know.
Yeah, when you're talking about the time weighted too, Kaplan actually specifically addressed the time weighted in actual matchmaking. A lot of people have this confusing idea in their head that the longer time they wait, that the better the match will actually be. And he kind of addressed the fact that just because you get into a match very quickly, or on the reverse side of that, if you wait a really long time, it doesn't necessarily mean that the match is any better or any worse. Now, we do know that I'm sure they're calculating a certain threshold at which, like you mentioned, there's going to be more elasticity in the choosing of the matchmaking. But again, we talked about specifically preferring to wait longer to get into a better match. But it doesn't necessarily equal 1-to-1. It doesn't mean that if you wait a really long time, you're going to get into a good match. So definitely something to keep in mind. If you're waiting a really long time, doesn't always necessarily mean that you're going to get a good experience. You could wait a really long time and get a very bad experience still. So
yeah, that's not too hard to understand, right? If you're waiting 10 minutes and the system wasn't able to find you a quality match within that 10 minutes, what's the likelihood of it finding a good match in another 10 minutes, right?
Exactly.
Once you get longer than the average game played, and pretty much the whole pool of players have cycled out already of the games they're in and out. But that's just my 2 cents. But anyways, there are some other things that take into consideration which I didn't know about really, is the map and how it affects your MMR. So we're talking about things that the matchmaking takes in consideration. So it does actually consider the map you're playing on, because the way I look at it is it's not a guarantee 50-50 on all the maps, so it actually does look at the map you're playing. It looks at whether you're attacking or defending on that map. It does take into account your individual performance as an individual player, but also the individual performance you have on the different heroes that you might have played individually throughout the game. And we also learned that the win-loss is not a consideration.
Right. So something that we've talked about previously in the past, specifically with people talking about the force win rating, or the force, 50% rating. People talking about getting into winning or losing streaks and having it force them into certain matches. And they definitely, again, reiterating that does not exist, is not included within the matchmaking system.
Right. So as one would expect, when you win, your MMR is going to go up, and when you lose, it goes down. But what he's trying to say is, the system isn't going to be like, out of the last 6 games, you lost, 5 of them. So we'll try to somehow alter, the next match to kind of let you win. That's pretty much what it means, is the win-loss ratio, the ratio of your games isn't going to be in consideration regarding MMR.
And really looking at that, that would be such a poor way of doing matchmaking, because people don't look at the actual result of that. If the matchmaker were, for example, to take into account your win-loss ratio, then essentially that skill rating that you're currently at matters less than just because you lost a few games. So if you lost a few games, say you went from 45 down to 44, then because of those last few losses that you had, then it's going to put you into even a lower bracket. Basically then the skill rating is non-existent in that factor. So yeah, they don't want to take that into account at all. You're in your skill rating. That is where they're looking for other players to match you with. It does not care whether you lost or won your last few matches.
Right, so let's change gears now into competitive. We're already quite a bit into the show, but we'll skim over this real quickly, right? So one thing I want to note on really quick in the competitive scene is we've seen the popularity of some heroes change. First thing that comes to mind for me is Roadhog.
Right. So again, we talked about previously the recent patch and the changes to McCree and Widowmaker, and a lot of that really having an effect on the heroes also with the addition of the 1 hero limits being seen in a lot of the tournaments coming around. So huge changes in the popularity of certain characters, at least what we're seeing anecdotally. Roadhog being one of the ones that I've played a lot more since the changes to Widowmaker and McCree. People talking about just kind of a good replacement for someone like McCree because of the fact that he is a tank, he has a lot of health, but he also has that nice 1-2 combo with the hook into the left click.
Right, so there's probably a lot of variables that play a role, especially when you're looking competitive, you're looking at different rule sets, like 1 hero limits is going to affect stuff like this. But in general, definitely an uptick on Roadhog, seeing him, a lot on both teams, attacking, defending. Mercy, although she's definitely picked a lot, I would say she's not 100% all the time on both teams. And I think that has a lot to do with people are really... It's just not a really good meta for Mercy. She's not staying alive very long.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely seen that, especially in the tournament play. We've seen a lot of Mercy still being played because of the res being so strong, but it's just much harder for her to stay alive in the current meta. So definitely seeing those Mercy support players struggling to kind of make their plays like they used to.
Yeah, some other heroes like 76 comes to mind. There's a little bit more, 76. But overall, the way I look at it is because of the nerf to McCree, which was such an anti-tank hero, it really starts to incentivize tanks. So you're seeing maybe 3 tanks on a team. And, I mean, I don't know if I like that direction specifically because I'd rather it favor more hit scan characters, more skill-based characters. So, although I like the changes to the McCree right-click and the Widow, I think the effect that it has currently, what we're seeing, is kind of bad. You don't want to incentivize like a tank heavy meta, but that's just personal preference too.
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely agree with that. I mean, I've had a lot of fun playing Roadhog, and I have fun playing my tanks. But yeah, I definitely prefer a more hit scan oriented and actual skill based meta. But yeah, as you mentioned, we're seeing a lot more tanks in the meta so far. We're seeing, definitely double tank running pretty much majority of the time. And also, as you mentioned with the sport with Mercy, we're actually seeing a lot less double Lucio or Lucio Mercy. So a lot of times we're seeing just the single support now.
Right, so of course we would have to talk about the Envious ranking change, right? So for a while, Cloud9 has really been the number 1 uncontested spot for probably 2 months running. And this last week, they've been debunked by Envious.
Right, so Envious is just on fire lately. 24 win streaks in a row, 24 wins in a row. They're now sitting in the number 1 ranking worldwide. Just dominating most people in the meta right now. They're just doing such a great job with just their play. Their team play overall is just really top notch right now.
Yeah, so the way I see it is, they have their gaming house in North America. And I think they're starting to settle down. They've been practicing together now in the house for a while, and they've just been delivering. And Cloud9, in the last 12 games, they've only won 6. So, it's kind of like a 50% win rate in the last 12 games, and that kind of affect their rating.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely kind of been on a downstroke as of lately. I mean, they're still such a great team. We don't want to take anything away from Cloud9. They've still been putting up a great effort, even against Envious. Just really having a tough time of it. Envious has really just been getting the better of them lately. Also mentioning with new teams, we have Misfits actually acquiring Graviton Surge. So we were seeing Graviton Surge a lot more lately. They were doing pretty well to begin with. And they've now officially signed with the Misfits. So they actually just had quite of an uptick. They're now 3rd in the world, first in EU. So actually kind of surprising. I was hoping Rogue would kind of come out of it. But they've kind of had a little bit of a downstroke on themselves because Rogue has kind of had some changes here and there, not really kind of settling down yet. So still yet to see what will happen with that.
Yeah, so we're just talking about the top 2 NA teams being Cloud9 and Envious. So now we're talking about, Misfits and...
Rogue
and
as
Rogue
well.
being the
So
top 2
Rogue
in
was
EU.
kind of previously the number 1 in EU, and with Tavik and some of the other players, now kind of on a little bit of a downswing. But they've had a lot of roster changes. So once they settle down, I expect they will pick back up.
Yeah, and the interviews coming out of Misfits, previously Graviton Surge, they all seem very happy with, being signed by Misfits. They seem like, they really, believe in us, and we're really happy to be with them, which is always good to hear. And yeah, they've been on, a 10 win streak?
A 10-win streak, yeah. So they've been doing amazing so far. And it kind of ties us into our next point, some of the gaming tournaments that have been coming past lately. First one, talk about Amazon Gaming Series, the kind of the big tournament in the EU. So 10,000 euro open tournament, and Misfits took that 3-0 versus Creation Esports. So doing a great job there. So good job, guys. Looking forward to that. I mean, really doing a great job against the mainstay of the EU.
Right, and congrats to Misfits. You know, like we said, #1 team in the EU, and it's always nice to see new teams and just new organizations coming on board in Overwatch in general, right? The more the merrier, right?
Definitely. I mean, looking forward to even more great games. So definitely looking forward to that. Next one to kind of talk about the Alienware monthly melee for June. Envious versus Cloud9, which we kind of just talked about. Envious kind of taking that right home 3-1. Amazing job against Cloud9. Cloud9 still able to take one of those matches, but just really having a tough time with Envious.
And of course, we always encourage our listeners to go and check out these VODs. I mean, you can find them on YouTube, you can find them different places, wherever you get your games, even Twitch or whatnot. But definitely go back, watch these games. They're tons of fun, and you're going to learn something too. You know, you're going to learn some strategy, you're going to learn some placements, compositions, and check it out and support them too.
Right, definitely. You can watch those anytime, kind of go back, even older tournaments, and really pick up some really cool tips and tricks here and there. Also wanted to kind of highlight one of the more amateur series going on. The Luxury Watch #1 is the first Luxury Watch series. It was a $175 open tournament, and Unplugged took that straight away, 3-0 versus Wave. So great job to Unplugged, and hopefully we see more of those teams coming up and just fighting for the top seeds. So looking forward to those amateur teams kind of coming up and really building a team.
Yeah, it's great to see the variety of matches. I mean, we have a podcast every week, and we're talking about all these different tournaments. There's so many tournaments, the larger ones, the smaller ones. If you want to get involved, I mean, there's open tournaments every single week, and you'll be able to get into that. And speaking of that, the One Nation of Gamers, ONOG, they had Operation Breakout, $15,000 prize pool, and the finals came down to Rogue and Luminosity.
Yeah, so Rogue taking that series 2-0, and this was an actual combined, it was an invite and a open qualifier as well. So we've seen a good number of teams in this series, but Rogue really kind of taking it home 2-0.
Right, and one thing I noticed, I just want to get, just touch on a little bit, is the 60-tick servers, I guess, are having some problems with it, slightly, especially considering like cross realms, different regions.
Right.
So some of those games weren't played on the 60-tick servers. I mean, we hear a lot about the tick, the 60-tick and what have you, but so there's pretty much a high bandwidth option within the custom game. So when you're watching these tournaments, they're being played on the high bandwidth, when they can, to get a little bit better tick, better frequency, server response. And I guess they're having a little bit issues. There are a few games they weren't playing on a 60-tick server, specifically because there were some teams that weren't all North America.
Right. So I mean, we've seen problems with it in the past. Blizzard kind of putting in a update to kind of fix some of the stability issues, and I think they're a lot better here across the board. But sometimes across realms and that such, having some issues with those. So. We also wanted to kind of highlight some of the upcoming events that you might want to keep your eye out for. We have the Beat Invitational. It's kind of a group setup, so it's going to be going on June 27 through 28 is going to be the group stage qualifiers, all the way up to the July 1st through the 17th, the playoffs. So the group stage is going to be a double elimination. All the teams are actually going to advance to the playoffs. So the double elimination is actually just to set up the seeds. So whatever team wins will go up in the higher seeds, and the lower teams will go in the lower seeds for the playoffs. And then the playoffs are going to be double elimination as well, best of 5 except for the first round, and then grand finals will actually end up with a best of 7.
Yeah, so that's something to look forward to, upcoming event. And in addition to that, the ESL Atlantic Showdown, which is, correct me if I'm wrong, the biggest prize pool, right, that we've seen?
The biggest one so far. So it's going to be an open qualifier that's going to be going on July 4th through the 28th. So huge qualifier. It's 4 separate qualifying days for each region. So 4 for the U.S. and 4 for the EU.
North America, not just U.S.
Yeah, sorry. North America and EU.
Can't leave the Canadians out. Come on.
I know, right? And then the final qualifier will be on the August 1st to the 8th, and all the way up to the main event will be on August 20th and 21st. So the open qualifiers are going to be single elimination all the way up to the top 32 teams will be the final qualifiers. So 16 from the NA and 16 from EU, all the way up to the final qualifier is going to be double elimination, best of 5. And the top 8 will actually go on to the main event at Gamescom in Cologne, Germany. So it's going to be 4 from NA and 4 from EU battling it out in Cologne.
So by far the biggest event that we've seen so far. You're going to see tons of teams, tons of games. It's $100,000. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, it's a $100,000 tournament. It's the biggest one we've seen so far. Amazing tournament. ESL always doing such a great job, and we actually got a little bit of a glimpse. They talked about the rule sets thus far with the event. So the main event is kind of not set up yet, but as far as the open qualifier and the final qualifier, we do know that they're going to be going with the competitive play format in which we're seeing in the PTR thus far. With the exception, of course, of the coin flip. Not many people vying to go with that option. So all the competitive play format will go into effect except for the coin flip. Ties will actually go to actual predetermined control map as we've previously seen. And then another big change is going to be the maps. We're used to seeing a veto, so you see a draft in the very beginning. Teams will actually veto out maps until they find their starting map, and then, of course, loser's choice from there. They're actually changing that up, so each week, specifically with the qualifiers, they're going to have 6 map rotation predetermined before they even start the maps, and so it's going to be one of each type, and there are not going to be any vetoes. So the first map is already going to be pre-chosen, and then from there it will go on to loser's choice.
Yeah, so we could probably have a whole conversation maybe for a future episode based on what we've been seeing in competitive as far as formatting goes. So ESL has come out and said, they're going to be using the competitive play format, which Blizzard has kind of been working on and accepted. And, you can have a pretty good conversation about how we've seen the competitive scene kind of veer away from what Blizzard, from what we know Blizzard is looking at. So, we've seen, time or stopwatch, for example, the competitive scene highly favors stopwatch, Blizzard, not so much. So same thing could be used on hero limits, right? We've seen, for the most part, the vast majority of tournaments be using the hero limits, but obviously in the game, Blizzard believes that's a fundamental, way to play the game is not having hero limits. So
yeah, and it's specifically ESL mentioned as well, and they previously had the 1 hero limit going on, but with this tournament in the ESL Atlantic Showdown, they're not going to be using hero limits, and they spoke in length about how they're in agreement with Blizzard and that it is a core fundamental of the game, and they would like to see it in their tournament. So.
Yeah, the way I look at it is it's still very early in the game's life cycle, very early just in general for everything, and right now is the time to experiment. Let's try as much things, as different things as we can. Obviously, everyone's going to have their own opinions on things, but right now is the time to experiment. I think eventually, we'll settle down. And this is not something new to Overwatch. This is something you experience with every game, and eventually we'll settle on a format that's, everyone's pretty happy with. Right,
and definitely looking forward to seeing where we go. I mean, I'm really not sure either way from hero limits to not, but definitely going to keep my eye on the ESL Atlantic Showdown. Check it out. We'll definitely be following it. Looking forward to that. So getting right into our strategy segment this week. Again, we're going to be talking all about Zenyatta. I'm really excited to talk about Zenyatta. I have not had a chance to play him lately, but with the recent changes to Widowmaker and McCree, I really felt like it was a perfect time to really talk about that support hero that doesn't get so much play as of lately, and I guess that's kind of a trend for us. We talk about all the heroes that don't really get played in the competitive thus far.
Yeah, I mean, we tried to talk about the characters that probably won't be getting nerfed very soon, so the information is relevant for a while. But yeah, so today we're talking all about Zenyatta in our strategy segment. To begin off, he's pretty much a omnic guru kind of guy that follows, the footsteps of some
Mandata.
Mandata up in Nepal. They're probably not affected by the weather as much. Robots? I mean, I don't know.
Probably not.
Apparently, they have feelings. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, who knows? But so Zenyatta, support character. He has 150 health, 100 of which is shield, which is really kind of cool for me. I really like the way he plays. That 100 shield, the majority of being his shield, really kind of plays into how you play the character.
Right, so his weapon is Orb of Destruction. If you're looking at him, he has these balls that circulate around his neck, and that's what he uses for his primary weapon. So his left click is going to shoot out energy orb. He has a 20 ammunition. Obviously, you can left click or right click. He does have an alternate fire, just like some heroes do. And his left click's going to do about 45 damage. There's going to probably be some fall off there. And it takes 2 seconds to reload, and you charge up your balls again.
Right. So one thing to note with him is that there is fall off, but they do fly perfectly straight regardless of how far away. So I mean, it really plays into how you want to play him. He's able to be in the back really and do damage from afar, able to just really aim those shots really accurately. So about 45 damage, obviously with fall off, 3 rounds per second, and a 2-second reload time on his left click. And his alternate fire, right click, is going to be an orb volley. One of the coolest abilities for a right click I've seen in the game so far. Is really nice add to him as a character. It really changes the way you can play him. So again, that all ties into the 20 ammo, but that volley is actually going to be chargeable all the way from 1 shot all the way up to 5 shots, and you'll see
depending on how long you charge it.
Yeah, depending on how long you charge it, and you kind of see them pop up on the screen in order from 1 to 5. And then you're actually it's gonna be about a 2 to 2.5 second for a full charge of all 5 of his volley. It's gonna do about 35 damage per orb, so it's about a max of 175. And it's again about a 2-second reload time, and you actually can headshot with this alternate fire, which is also a difference in some of the characters as well.
Right, so the orbs on the right click are going to do a little bit less damage. So the left click, your primary fire, 45 damage. Alternate fires, you're doing about 35 per orb. And like you said, there is pretty strong accuracy, but there is some travel time. So it's not quite hit scan. There is some travel time.
Right,
but he's definitely the most lethal support in the game.
Which I love about it. That's why I love playing him so much, is just being able to really dish out that damage when you need it.
All right, so let's talk about Orb of Harmony, which is default on the PC Shift. It's a 30 heal per second. It's 40 meter range. The duration is going to be as long as you're in line of sight. It gives you a 3-second window, so they don't have to be in line of sight. But as long as you are in line of sight within a 3-second frame, or as long as you're alive and the target's still alive, it's going to be a constant 30 heal per second.
Right, so it kind of like we talked about with Mercy, being able to kind of lose that line of sight temporarily, just being a little bit more loose on that and not causing you to drop that Orb Harmony right away. So again, that is your heal for your characters. It's kind of how how Zenyatta plays, is you're going to put those orbs on your team and really heal them depending on who needs help the most.
And you can only do one per... you can only have one at a time.
Right, so even if you have multiple Zenyatas, you can't stack them. That was one of the changes that they made previously from the beta, was not being able to stack those orbs. So speaking of, you have your Orb of Discord, which is your E ability default on the keyboard, and it's going to be an additional 50% damage to whomever you put it on. So that is going to be for your enemies. You're going to place that Orb of Discord on them. They're going to take 50% damage increase. It's about a 40 meter range, same as the Orb of Harmony. And then it's going to stay on as long as you're in line of sight or until you or your target dies. It's about 3 seconds. Again, you can be out of line of sight for that 3-second window, and it will stay on them.
All right, so let's talk about his ultimate. It's called Transcendence. Pretty cool ultimate, I would say. Very good for engaging your whole party.
Yeah, really. So a lot of the supports having kind of that get out of jail free card, Mercy having that res, really strong, both offensively and defensively. But Transcendence really being able to help with those pushes. So it's very unique in the way that you use it. Again, you just kind of pop it. It's 100% heals per second to the characters around you in the radius.
It's not 100%. It's 100 HP.
I'm sorry, did I say 100? It's 100 HP per second.
And so if every second that passes, everyone in... There's a visual representation of the area effect around you. It's very clear. Right. So everyone is getting 100 heals every second, and you're immune to damage altogether.
Right. So when Zenyatta is in Transcendence, he's immune to damage. It is a 10 meter radius, and it heals your friendlies around you for a duration of 6 seconds.
Right. So that's his whole kit. So let's talk a little bit about playing Zenyatta with everything at your disposal. Let's talk about the full volley shot, regardless of how much ammo is left. So even if you have 1 or 2 ammo or balls left, you're able to charge up 5 no matter what. So even if you have just a couple you're able to do your ultimate fire and charge up a full amount, regardless of what's left in your clip or around your neck.
Right. So it really allows you to play a little more openly with the way you use your offensive abilities on Zenyatta. So you can kind of do some left click here and there and kind of help out your team. And then if you need to, you can use that volley regardless of how much ammo is left. So again, your orb volley usage is really a big part of how you play Zenyatta. So Zenyatta mainly is a very kind of backline hero. He stays in the back. He wants to make sure that he stays alive as much as possible. You're going to try and heal your friendlies as much as possible and get out those orb discords are definitely going to be helpful to your team. But because of his low health pool, he really is vulnerable and his lack of mobility. So you kind of got to be very careful with that. But the orb volley really kind of helps you in those situations. Definitely specific uses when peeking around corners. Definitely you're able to charge up the volley before you peek and then release it if you know where you're aiming. And also you're able to use that ability. It's really going to be the most amount of damage output that you can put out with him. But you definitely want to be aware of some counters as well.
Right. So as with any character, it's all about getting value out of your abilities, knowing when to, take advantage of the abilities and the skills that they have. So like I said, the orb volley, a lot of people might understand exactly the circumstances where it would be useful. But for example, if, Reaper is, shadow stepping or wraith forming or a maze or ice block, these different circumstances, you could have a full charge ready for them. You could charge it up while you're behind the corner, like you said, peeking. And if you have that stationary turret there or a bastion, you can just peek and just unload them all on them. Of course, you want to put your discord on them before you're hitting them. Take more damage.
Right. Orb discord really, mainly the main thing that I look at whenever dealing damage with anything is making sure you have that discord available. But also as well, keep an eye on enemy players and how they can counter your orb volley, because it is kind of a charge thing. You have a time limit before in which it's just released. You can't hold it for an indeterminate amount of time. So people can actually use that wraith form against you if they hold out long enough, and they can just kind of wraith form out of the volley.
Yeah, so pretty much, after they wraith form, after they're, that would probably be the time to use your orb volley. And it's also important to note that when you're using your Orb of Harmony and Orb of Discords, they do have a visual effect on your screen to let people, know that, you do have this heal on you or this Discord on you. So you do have an outline on your screen. It's a purpley, shadowy effect if you have Discord on you to let you know, 50% additional damage from all sources. And the heal is like a goldish yellow. And there is, text that pops up as well, like with the person's name, like, this person's healing you.
Right, and there will actually be a text on Zenyatta below as well to show when your when your orb comes back to you. So if your Orb of Harmony or Orb of Discard gets reset from maybe the person dying and such, you'll actually see that text pop up on the bottom as well.
Yeah, also the Discord Orb and the Harmony Orb have a 40-yard range to throw it on them, but once they have the orbs on them, it's an infinite, really, line of sight. As long as you're in line of sight, but the range is actually infinite as long as, you can see them.
Right. So, one of the things to consider is how you're using your orbs. Who you're putting them on is definitely important. Obviously, if you're putting your Orb of Harmony on someone, you got to kind of keep in mind, okay, is this a, Lucio? Is this a, Tracer? Or is this someone who's going to get out of range really quickly? You want to keep an eye on them because you want to try and make sure that you keep it on them as long as possible. But again, as you mentioned, as long as you're in line of sight, it will stay on them.
Right, so let's talk about Transcendence, his ultimate. It has quite a bit of uses and counters. My personal favorite is using it for a really hard to engage. So, like we said, you are completely immune to damage while you're transcending, and you're healing people 100 heal every second. So, if your friendlies can die if they just get like a lethal headshot, for example. That'll still kill them because 100 heals per second is not going to do much. But you are going to be completely immune to damage, but you're not going to be immune to everything in the game.
Right. So specifically, one of the things you're very vulnerable to is basically any kind of movement, any knockback and such. You're still very vulnerable to. So a Lucio boop or a Reinhardt charge and such are definitely one of the things you want to keep an eye out, especially because, again, you still don't have a lot of mobility when you're in Transcendence.
Right, definitely one of the downsides of Zenyatta is his mobility. He has no footsteps. You're not going to hear him coming around the corner, but he doesn't have any way to maneuver and speed up or fly away or something like that as the other healers do. And yeah, Reinhardt charge is pretty brutal because you're not going to take damage, but he's probably going to take you away from the team that you're healing, or even a Pharah comes to mind, knocking you back away from a team and then possibly getting a kill that way.
Yeah, so you can still be moved around, so your team needs to keep an eye on that and make sure that they're inside that 10-meter range, because otherwise you're not getting healed. So I think that's going to do it for our character discussion this week. Stay tuned next week. We're going to be talking all about Tracer. I know you're super excited to talk about Tracer.
Tracer's my favorite character. I mean, she's my second most played behind Mercy, but she's definitely my number one fragger, definitely my number one carry. She's my go-to girl, and
yeah, I mean, I like Tracer too. I don't get a chance to play her as much as I would like to, especially because I don't feel like I'm as good as I can be with some other players. But, I mean, who doesn't love her kit? I mean, she is such a great kit, and she just plays so amazingly. Love it. So definitely stick around for next week. We're talking all about Tracer. And thanks again for listening. See you next week on the show. And again, any questions, comments, anything you guys want to send to us, definitely send us a message at our Twitter, email, YouTube. The links are below.
Right. Again, thank you so much for all the people who have reached out to us already and contacted us. Please feel free to ask us any questions. We think it would be great to be able to answer questions, on our shows in the future. And you could contact us at our email, aheroeswelcomepodcast@gmail.com. And we're also at Twitter, @2moonstudios. Both of those links will be in the show notes or the summary, however you're receiving this podcast. Thank you so much. And until next time.
Till next time.